The first loop construct that we are going to look into is the for loop. And here's the syntax for the for loop. You have the keyword for, you open the bracket and you say initialize loop counter, semicolon. You have test loop counter, and then you have semicolon followed by modify loop counter. Close the bracket, open the curly brace for the for block. So this is the beginning of the for block. You can have a number of statements here, ix, iy, iz. Close the for block, and this is how a for construct looks like. Using the for, you can decide how many times you want to execute these statements. The number of times you want to execute instructions ix, iy, and iz are totally controllable using these parameters here. So if you want to execute these twice, thrice, 4 times, 100 times, 10,000 times, a million times, you can easily do that by manipulating these things over here. Let's take an example. So let's say I want to execute ix, iy, and iz 4 times. How would my loop syntax be? Since I want to execute 4 times, I initialize my counter to 1. I say I less than or equals to 4. So I'm going from 1 to 4 in steps of 1. ix, iy, iz. Let me tell you how this works. As soon as you hit the for loop, you initialize the loop counter. So that's the first thing that happens. Then you check the loop counter with the test condition. Here it says I less than or equals to 4. 1 is less than or equals to 4. So that's true. Since it is true, you can go into the loop, execute these instructions one by one sequentially. Once you're done executing the statements sequentially, you have run out of statements in the loop. Then you go to modify loop counter. Here I becomes 2 because you have I equals to I plus 1. So 1 became 2. Once you make a modification, you test your loop counter again. Here you have 2 is less than or equals to 4. That is true. Since it is true, you enter the loop, execute all the instructions sequentially, and then you go and modify the loop counter where I becomes 3. Now when I is 3, you check the loop counter again. 3 is less than or equals to 4. That's true. The condition is true, so go into the loop, execute all the instructions sequentially. Once you're done executing all the statements, go back to the modify loop counter and modify it by 1. So 3 becomes 4. 4 is less than or equals to 4. That's true. So go into the loop again, execute all these instructions sequentially. Then modify your loop counter. I becomes 5. Now when I becomes 5, you test the condition again. 5 less than or equals to 4. That's false. And as soon as the condition becomes false, you exit out of the loop. And whatever statement you have after the loop gets executed. This is how a for loop works. You can clearly see that these statements were executed 4 times in total. That is, each instruction was executed 4 times. And the number of times these statements were executed, we were able to control it using this one here. So we had I going from 1 to 4 in steps of 1. Now, if you wanted to execute these set of statements, let's say 100 times, your loop condition would be, or your loop would be, I is 1, I less than or equals to 100, I plus plus, or I equals to I plus 1.